VegCo that sells jams, sauces and pickles. But when lockdown started, Ellie set up the North East Food Hub, staffed by volunteers and completely from scratch.
It was a bit of a mammoth project, actually. So we started it by recruiting as many local producers as we could to fit into various categories. So we had meat producer, we had milk, we had yogurt, cheese, bread, you name it, we had it, or we had somebody to fit that category. I wanted to provide a service that had basically everything people would want from their weekly shop. So fruit and veg, you know, everything from the basics to the more specialist things like, you know, cakes and all sorts of things. We managed to, as far as I could see, we've pretty much filled as many categories as we could. So we had around 30 producers involved. The way the site worked was that they had their own page, basically, that they could edit their stock and they could update their products every week. But then from the customer's point of view, they just saw one huge shop, which was quite nice.
If I close my eyes, I can kind of imagine, not chaos by any means, but a kind of organised chaos, maybe.
It's a polite way to put it, yeah.
Because it must have been a it must have been a huge job. And where did you find all these people to help you?
So there was 2 of us that ran it and organised it. We took all the ambient product into the shed, and then we actually hired in a 6-metre chilled shipment container.
Wow, yeah.
So we took all the ambient into the shed and we put all the chilled product into the fridge. Meanwhile, I've planned all the routes on the Monday of the week for running the market, so that we usually had about 8 routes a week that were running, with anything between 20 to 40 drops per route.
A lot of these people you would be delivering to wouldn't be able, because of either lockdown restrictions or their own health or shielding, they wouldn't have been able to go and get their deliveries. So you must have some really lovely stories of people who were just so grateful to be getting this delivery.
Yeah, I've got a few. We had quite a lot of shielding families or individuals, because sometimes that was some of the only people they were seeing really all week, was me or some of the volunteers that were doing the delivery driving. You know, as the weeks went on, some of the delivery drivers, as they got used to the addresses that they were going to, because we had quite a loyal following, so we were going to a lot of the same houses almost every week. So a lot of the drivers were then, you know, waving to people through windows and having a chat through the door, and people were getting excited at the fact that they knew that some of the boys were coming to the house. On one of the weeks, one of my pals, he was one of our volunteer drivers, and he had an accident and damaged his back. And, you know, that I had to put an email out to everybody just to say, look, we've had to take in another volunteer, and, you know, they might not be as quick this week to get your order, just to let you know that it will be today, and blah, 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 blah. And the volume of emails I got back asking if he was okay. They didn't care when their order was coming. They were just asking if Adam was okay.
Oh, that's so nice.
It was really nice.
So you mentioned there that the drivers were volunteers. So I'm guessing, therefore, that this initiative was just kind of washing its face, and that it wasn't ever designed to be profitable, but it was more of a community gift, I guess. Is that true?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so the volunteers that helped run the whole hub, they were all furloughed or redundant.
Yeah. Now, Ellie, the title of this episode is Unsung Heroes. You might be a bit too modest to accept that title yourself, so we shall bestow it on you ourselves. But I imagine also, I think you thoroughly deserve it, but I imagine also so do a huge number of people that you've been working with and have been working for you. Can you just kind of describe how you feel about that team of people being classified as unsung heroes? Well,
I'm now the colour of a beetroot, so thank you for that. Luckily, nobody can see me. I'm now taking a hot sweat. Yeah. No, I'm really proud of the team, and we saw the opportunity and we wanted to connect the community and provide a service for them. You know, all we wanted was for them to make use of it. You know, it was for no, you know, personal gain. You know, I wanted to do this to make sure, you know, a lot of my friends I could instantly see were going to struggle. So, you know, by providing this service where all they really had to do was turn up to our farm once a week, dump their stuff. Oh, Ellie will count it, it'll be okay, it'll be fine. You know, they just turned up, delivered, and off they went.
Yeah. So actually there's a whole range of unsung heroes here. The producers are, because they've been keeping this going. You couldn't have done what you did without those 30 plus producers. Your drivers, you know, everybody packing, everybody else involved. And then I suppose it strikes me actually that in the wider kind of rural food and farming sector, one group of unsung heroes is actually the public, because they've really come out in droves and supported local business throughout this whole pandemic.
Completely. The support we had from the public was, you know, when we started it, we had no idea if anybody really was that bothered. Were they just going to go to the shops? Were they that fussed about continuing to support local businesses? That's always goes through my head, you know. When it comes to it, what are people really going to do? And to see the volume of people that connected with us and engaged with us and wanted to be part of it, and we're getting new people every week, and it's just grew and grew and grew.
That was Ellie Sinclair of VegCo, so thank you to her. She'll be needing a long lie down in a dark room. She must be absolutely exhausted after all those weeks of constant effort. Our next conversation is with someone who spotted an opportunity, and boy did she run with it, writing and publishing a recipe book / lockdown diary, all to raise money for her local hospital and for the Royal Highland Education Trust.
Okay, my name is Anne Redpath and I live at the Yett Farm, which is in Hoonham, right down. Our March fence is the English border so we're down between Kelso and Jedburgh, right in the heart of the Scottish borders. When lockdown, just before it started, I was amazed because everyone seemed to be panic buying pasta and rice, and I thought, I wonder what these people are going to do with... I'd been at Costco and the huge bags of pasta and rice were going. So I thought, that's weird. I wonder why they're not buying a bag of tatties, because you can do so much more with a bag of tatties. And then when lockdown started, people were struggling to get flour and struggling to get bread. And I suggested that if they had flour in their cupboards, maybe they could make some scones. And I put on a scone recipe and somebody said, oh, good idea. And then the following day, I think it was how to make self-raising flour if you only had plain flour. And somebody said, oh, you should start a blog. And I'm always one, if somebody suggests something, I think, oh, that's a good idea. Never one to say no. So it's sort of, and at the start it was sort of tatty scones, pancakes, very basic, traditional, easy store cupboard recipes that people would make. And then it just sort of grew arms and legs, and I started adding a wee story maybe about what the recipe meant to me or what it meant to my family. It's a sort of collection of my family recipes. I know every family has their own things that they make. And then one day I put on 15s. I don't know if you're familiar with 15s, which is the coconut rolled log, and it's sliced into circles. And it's the easiest recipe in the world. It's 15 digestives, 15 cherries, 15 marshmallows, half a tin of condensed milk. And I thought, simple. And it got something like 150 shares, 97 likes. It's loads and loads of comments. And I thought, that's really bizarre because it's the easiest thing ever. And everyone said, oh, you should make a book. You know, you should put these things into a book. So the seed was sown. And once the seed was sown, it became a lot easier because I just cut and pasted my Facebook pages. And as I say, it's grown arms and legs. 700 have sold out in 3 weeks, and I've got another pallet load coming tomorrow.
Wow!
It's just grown unbelievably, which is fabulous. But it's not just recipes. That's what a lot of people are finding, because I've got in that it's a recipe book. But throughout the whole book and throughout the Facebook posts, there's things that I have shared, just all the sort of normal things that were on Facebook, but sort of poems about lockdown. And then on this day, you know, the price of diesel was, and, you know, they're even talking that the Olympics might be cancelled. Can you believe it? And then, of course, 2 or 3 weeks later, the Olympics have been cancelled, Glastonbury, and it's got a whole load of facts all the way through about lockdown. So one of the people in the village shop, he's also an author, he was saying, you know, it's a historic document because it's got a lot of stuff through it.
That's really interesting, actually, because I've got a couple of spiral-bound recipe books that I think were my grandmother's, when we pass these ones on to our grandchildren, they can look back, and as you say, it forms not just a recipe book, but a record and a bit of an archive of 2020 and everything that happened. So that's really interesting. So what's the title of this book, Anne?
It is called Lockdown in Lambing, Recipe Book and Memories. I should send you a copy.
Oh, well, I'd love a copy. But I will buy a copy because I know that some of the revenue is going to charity, isn't it? Can you tell us about that?
Yes, when it was first suggested, it was at the time that everyone was out doing the clap on a Thursday night, and I thought this would be a good way to raise money for the NHS. We have the charity in our Borders General Hospital is called The Difference, and they supported a friend of mine who had a stroke a few years ago. And there's quite a few friends round about that work at the BGH, and I thought, that would be a good chance to support them. And then as it went on, and I was having quite a lot of support from the agricultural community, and I thought RHET would be a good charity to support because it the book does what they try to teach. It's saying go to your local butcher and find out where your stuff's from, buy local, which is what RHET are all about, teaching kids where their food comes from and what the agricultural community have to go through to produce it, sort of thing. So the money's going to be split between the two of them.
Oh, that's amazing. A key question, obviously, is how do people get their hands on this book?
So the email address to purchase it is £10 with £2 postage. The email address is lockdownrecipebook@gmail.com, and then I'll reply with all the payment details. It's easy as that. If there's been some people have had a problem with the email address, and I don't know why. My sister couldn't send one, and my best friend couldn't send one. So then just find me on Messenger, I think, or I don't know whether you want to put my name and address.
If people don't have any luck with that email address, they can contact us at the podcast, and we can then put them in touch with you. So that would be a good way of doing it. Well, now, I didn't tell you this at the beginning because I thought you'd be too modest, but the title of this episode of the podcast is called Unsung Heroes.
Okay.
And I thought you might even refuse to talk to me if I told you that because you'd probably be far too modest. But you're just the perfect person. This is exactly what we're looking for, is stories of people who've put themselves out a bit, might be doing something that they enjoy, which is a bonus. But, you've put yourself out. You've dedicated a lot of your time for nothing, all to raise a lot of money for charity. So I think everybody in rural Scotland, and particularly those who've got a connection with RHET and with the BGH, should be very grateful and very proud of you. So thank you on behalf of everybody.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work, and I'm going to drop you an email later today to order mine. So thank you again, Anne.
We have a bit of a departure next. The Highland Show is not on, as you know, in 2020, but we wanted to give a nod of thanks to the contractors and ground staff and others who are still working hard this year to maintain the site and the grounds. Next up, we'll hear from one of them, the Highland Society's long-standing electrical contractors, working as hard as ever in this fallow year. Just a note before we get started, though, there's a bit of an echo on this recording, but it's interesting stuff, so please do stick at it if you can.
My name's Kenny Hope. I'm the Managing Director of Pratt Brothers Edinburgh. We are the electrical contractors and have been for a number of years for the Royal Highland Show. I started in 1978, and it was our job. We used to start around about the end of April, and there'd be a squad of maybe about 6 to 8 guys who'd put these overhead cables on these existing telegraph poles round the showground, and we'd work 7 days a week. We'd work every night, apart from the weekend, to 9 o'clock at night.
It's a big place, and it takes a lot of investment to keep a showground and keep the infrastructure in a usable fashion for such big events.
People think that we start the Highland Show maybe 3-4 weeks before it, but in actual fact we don't. We never stopped doing the Highland Show because of the maintenance that's associated with it. The other thing is, even like the buildings, to look after the buildings, we have over 1,000 emergency light fittings that have to be maintained, checked regularly. We've got about 30 switch panels that need to be serviced and checked on a regular basis. We use about 40 kilometres of cable. Overall, we're using about 3 megawatts of power in the Highland Show Zone for the 4 days, and about 30,000 litres of fuel and numerous kilowatt hours of electricity. So you could compare it with maybe a small town.
You must have a few stories that you could share. of times past and escapades and...
There's one that really sticks in my head, and it was hilarious.